Welcome back. This is a response and conversation video about John 13, 1 through 20. These were the verses, this was the lesson that we shared together on the Maundy Thursday just past, and so it's an opportunity for me to listen to you and to respond to some of the things that were sent in to me, and I am, as always, so grateful for that opportunity. There's one announcement that we should make. We're now outside of the season of Lent, and I am loath to put down the discipline of a midweek study, so I am suggesting that we study Luther's Small Catechism together. There are a number of these that we have at the church office, and I would be happy to send one to you if you do not have a smartphone. This will get you most of the way down the road for our study, and of course there'll be no charge for this at all. If you have a smartphone, then I would like you to be thinking about putting Luther's Small Catechism on your smartphone. Go on, wherever you get your apps, go on and look up Augsburg Fortress's Luther's Small Catechism. It's red and white and gray is the color scheme. There's a red background with white vines, and I trust that you know the source of the imagery of vines and branches, that makes some sense to you. So pick that up. It's a free download, it's a free app, but you'll be given the choice to upgrade for $1.99 to the study guide version. If you have $1.99, you absolutely want to upgrade. It's a much better and more complete catechism, and it will be what I'll be using as we go through it together. So, God willing, planning to start that midweek next week, which means that you've got a day or two to let us know at the church office if you need us to mail you one. And you've got substantially more time than that if you want to load it onto your phone. So that's a word of the wise, a warning. That is what's coming up. All right, so on Maundy Thursday, we talked about Jesus' Last Supper, the last evening he had with his disciples, and we talked about the foot washing part of that supper, where Jesus knew who he was, knew his hour had come, knew that he was from the Father, and going to the Father was filled with an assurance of himself that he had done the Father's will, and instead of making some great pronouncement at that point, or doing something magnificent or showy or spectacular, he stripped off his outer robe, he wrapped himself in a towel, he washed his disciples' feet, and then he commanded them to do likewise. So if you want to review what we covered, there's a whole video there. You can read the lesson. It's below this video, and we'll wait. You can pause and then come back and join us. For those of you who don't need that, we'll just continue. As part of my talking about Jesus' command to wash other people's feet, I came down pretty hard on foot washing ceremonies. I thought that they were a mistake for the people of God. And I got some pushback, and I want to be clear with you that I don't mean to offend anyone's piety, and I don't mean to attack anyone's piety. My goal in these conversations, my best self would have you know that my goal in all of our conversations is to clearly let you know why it is I do what I do, and then give you the opportunity to talk about that, so that sometimes you would be convinced that my path is a path of righteousness and growth, and sometimes I would be convinced that your path is a better path of righteousness and growth. A long time ago, about 150 years ago, I was on internship, and the first meeting I had with my intern supervisor, he gave me what was clearly a canned speech. He had an intern every year, and he had figured out the opening ritual to his perfect satisfaction. And he said, I just want to be clear, this is going to be a lot of extra work for me this year. You're going to make mistakes that I have to clean up. You're going to say things that you shouldn't say. You're going to do things that you shouldn't do. And by the time you get good, by the time you're able to help me with a lot, you're going to be leaving. So in case you're wondering why I have interns and why I do this to myself, it's good for the congregation to teach you and to serve you. And it's good for me to have someone in the system who asks me why 10 times a day, so that I don't just do what I want to do thoughtlessly or carelessly. So your job is to say why 10 times a day. I liked that. The speech got better. For any of you who supervise people, the next thing that he said to me was, I also am not going to spend all year chasing after you and trying to fix things that you're bad at and that you'll never be good at. I'm going to find 3 things you're good at, and I'm going to work with my whole heart to make you great in those 3 areas. I would have given him a kidney right there. But back to our point, and I do remember where I was, I like when you ask why. And I like when you push back, and I like that we can have conversations about the ramifications of God's Word. So just a quick review. The reason I don't like these public foot washing ceremonies is threefold. I think that it's role playing, it's play acting in which the pastor assumes the role of Jesus. And the people of God assume the role of the disciples, some of whom are in a state of denial, some of whom will soon betray, and most of whom are ignorant. It's supposed to be about me showing my humility, but in a strange way, it elevates me, and I think that's wrong. I don't like them because I think it makes a number of people deeply uncomfortable, and not for a good reason. I don't have a problem with making people uncomfortable if there is something about which they need to think, if there is some amendment of life that's necessary. But to make people needlessly uncomfortable is just a bad idea and a mistake, I think, for the church that aims to recruit others into the kingdom of God. Finally, I don't like it because I think the public nature of it is foreign to what Jesus did in that room. In that room, there were only participants. There were only people who were intimately involved, people who were touched. There was no one watching the show, no one off to the side. So that was my argument. Take it for what it's worth. That's why we don't do public foot washing ceremonies in the Tomorrow River Lutheran Parish. But I did get some pushback. All right? One person let me know that this is not part of her piety. And that she has deep reservations about it, and that in fact she was grateful for the idea that the public foot washing ceremonies lose the intimacy of that upper room. And for her, that helped her understand why she was uncomfortable with them. But she did want me to know that she's been part of a church that did it very well. That in this church, people knew in advance that they were going to have their feet washed. They had the opportunity to withdraw their name from consideration, and no one would be the wiser for it. People would be sitting with their families. There wouldn't be some row of anxious-looking people preparing for this ordeal in front of their friends, family, and neighbors. And that the teaching that accompanied the foot washing was always right on the button, right pitch perfect. About how this is an example of Jesus' service to those whom he loved, and that you and I are required to pour ourselves out in acts of love and service for the family of God. So I celebrate them. Congratulations to my colleagues. Well done to the people of God in that church. It sounds like they are taking a commandment literally that I think is figurative, but they're doing it with grace and with intentionality, and I have nothing but regard for them. Another person actually stopped me on the street, maintaining social distancing, but wanted me to know that sometimes these public foot washings build community. And the example that was given was that there was in another church a man who knew that he was going to be part of a public foot washing ceremony, and he had gone out and purchased new socks. Being a proper Norwegian, the socks were still being used long past their expiration date, but that wasn't something that he wished to share with the community, so he had purchased new socks, had not thought to wash said socks before putting them on, had worn them all day, had worked that day, and when it came time for the foot washing ceremony, when he removed his socks, his feet were purple. And when the water was poured over his feet, it turned the water in the bowl a deep purple. And that this was a memory that lingered around this man for years and years thereafter, and at his death was a topic of conversation, and everyone remembered that we were family together and that we'd shared this moment together, and that he had had his feet washed under these circumstances. I hope he was in on the joke. Don't you? It would be a shame to find out in the coming kingdom that he felt humiliated or bad about that. And there are plenty of things that we can remember about each other without remembering over and over public embarrassments. So it may be, I don't know this person, it may be that he was absolutely in on the joke, that he could laugh about it every time it was told, and that he would be delighted that that was a memory at his funeral. I wonder. Certainly, I don't think that's a reason to continue a ceremony, that it might lead to some communal joy, maybe at the expense of one of the participants. The most interesting response I got, though, was from a woman who was looking forward to her private Maundy Thursday observance with her husband, that they had a tradition in their marriage that on Maundy Thursday Eve they would wash one another's feet, and that for her, and by her report for them, this was an incredibly precious, an incredibly intimate, an incredibly meaningful opportunity for them to share in the passion of Christ with one another every year. So she wanted me to respond to that. My response is wonderful. Who am I to judge such intimacy? And who am I to judge a piety that you and your partner find meaningful and salutary as you remember Jesus' grace, as you remember his walk, as you remember his sacrifice, as you remember his service? I think it's a beautiful thing for you to remind one another and to remind yourselves that you are stewards of each other's bodies and each other's spirits, and that part of your work before God is to care for one another. So, as far as it goes, God be with you. Wonderful. Pastorally, I'm glad you're doing it. I hope that it leads you into a cycle of perpetual care, that it reminds you that this is a type, that this is something that you aspire to every day, and that part of being a Christian spouse is a willingness to be a steward of the other and to take off our pride and to meet the other's need. They're very real physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs. I hope it leads you into that, right? And that it's a tradition, I think, can be a beautiful thing because we need traditions. Traditions anchor us. They remind us. They teach us again the thing that we've forgotten or let slip to the side. And it's a way for us to say, yes, this is important. This is something that I believe. This is something that I'm going to do. And so that this happens once a year, that it would be an opportunity for you to celebrate your roles as stewards, and that it would push you into a fuller awareness of your occupation, of your vocation to and with one another, I think is lovely. Again, there is a way of doing that makes me hesitant to recommend it to others. Namely, I can imagine participating in something like that and then saying, I've done my bit. I washed my wife's feet. What more do you want of me? What percentage of guys out there washed their wives' feet this Maundy, Thursday? I'll tell you, almost none, almost zero. I'm a good guy. We're doing fine. Motor on. In that case, this would be a really poor idea. If it makes me complacent, if it makes me self-congratulatory, if it fosters my vanity or my self-absorption, it would be diabolical. You see that, right? And so this is something that pastorally I would be very careful about recommending, and then I would have lots of questions that go along with it. Let me tell you a different story. I know a man, he doesn't know I know this story. His wife went through chemo and was tremendously sick. She reported to a friend who reported to me that it was a very frequent event in their house that she would be suffering from nausea and vomiting and diarrhea all at the same time. And that she would be on the bathroom floor leaking from both ends, and he very quietly would come and help her and clean up the mess, not say a word about it, not look for any sort of praise or congratulation from her, not expect anything from her. She was not in her best place. And sometimes he caught the acid edge of her tongue for his troubles, and he was unflappable. He's one of my heroes. I hope he's one of your heroes. That he just showed up day after day, hour after hour, doing what needed to be done to be a steward and a caretaker for his spouse. I think that when the angels celebrate the achievements of human beings, I think that he figures prominently in their remembrances. He poured himself out quietly, privately, deliberately, intentionally, beautifully to care for one of God's beloved children. I think that's what Jesus is commanding on that first Maundy, Thursday, that we wash one another's feet. I think it has to do with our hearts and our spirits, our intentionality, our awareness, and our love made real in practical measures. My prayer for you today is that you would obey Jesus, that you would wash one another's feet, maybe even literally, but certainly intentionally and regularly with kindness and gentleness that matches the Master's. And may the God of mercy bless, protect, and keep you as you follow him and as you obey him. Thanks for spending the time. Don't forget to order your catechisms. See you soon.